Hey, it's K2, Kennard Carter here from 106 KM Yale, and I'm excited about a chance to moderate part two of our discussion during Black History Month, Blacks in Technology. And today's segment, part two, the future of Blacks in Technology. I've got a distinguished panel sitting here in front of me. I'm going to start to my right, investor, mentor. His resume is pretty extensive, but I had a chance to really get to know him on television from the series that he did from CNN's Black in America as an investor, Wayne Sutton.
Hi, Gennard. As always, pleasure to be back in the studio, and looking forward to this conversation, talking about future of Blacks in tech and everything that's happening in our space and how we can be more involved and more innovators and doers and creators.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then to his right, Miss Tracy Gray is in the building too. She's coming to us from a couple perspectives today, from the education standpoint, and also I want to kind of hit her up a bit and be our token today about women in technology and talking about the future there. Give us a little bit about your background, Tracy, and what brings you to us today.
Well, thank you, K2. I'm an education entrepreneur. I've been in the education field for over 20 years. I have a dual master's degree in early childhood and general education, and I've been a classroom teacher and an administrator, and I've made the leap into entrepreneurship as I see there's a need to increase the number of women and people of color in science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and there are several pathways to achieve those goals. And I see that there's as I've been talking with students, talking with teachers and administrators in the African American community specifically, finding out how much of a gap there is in access and finding out how to access in a plethora of experiences. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Sure. No, I got a few things I want to ask you about because I'm really passionate about education, especially being able to talk to listeners every day.
Yeah.
And young people specifically, having such a desire to be in our business, and this being a music format, always looking for some strategies to help, inform and how that people can develop some educational, but at the same time entrepreneurial perspective with how to monetize this stuff, which is great leading into my next panelist, which is Dan Miller, who was with us last time and is going to speak to us about some of his experiences as the token entrepreneur on the panel today about his success and maybe even some of the failures and struggles he's had as he's entered this space and has experienced, at the end of the day, a lot of success in the business with a music studio based technology platform.
Absolutely. Thank you, K2, and I'm excited to be back here for the second part of this segment. And yes, I'm the founder and CEO of a startup called Fresh Sessions. We're an online marketplace that connects recording artists with recording studios, so home studios, professional studios, any type of artist, management, label, brand that needs studio services, we can provide you for that.
Absolutely.
Provide that for you. And I'm really excited to be here from the entrepreneur perspective because you're absolutely right. This is not a linear path to success.
Sure.
Even if I would call it that. I mean, there's definitely ups and downs. And I'm definitely excited to share some of those with the listeners.
Sure. So let's go right into it. If you were to not necessarily itemize or list some of those basic struggles or challenges you had in the beginning, those feelings you had when this idea came to you and before you decided to make it a business.
Yep.
What would you say were the basic list of things that you had to overcome to start this business?
Absolutely. I would name the top three as number one being there's definitely a knowledge gap. So, founders and CEOs aren't born. There's definitely a discovery phase and an experience phase in which you have to go out and learn the basics of management, the basics of just knowing how to manage your finances as well as think strategically within your business. Secondly, I would say management of personnel.
Wow.
So you go from, pitching this idea with your friends, and then all of a sudden you're the CEO and you have to manage them and inspire them and motivate them. And that's a different dynamic from just, this person being your friend.
Right.
And it's interesting because, some people are receptive to it and some aren't.
Right.
And you have to figure out how to manage that landscape.
How'd you get the experience?
Just by doing.
Sure.
Yeah, for the knowledge pieces, I looked up some MBA syllabuses or syllabi, I would say, online, and the knowledge is out there, and especially now, the barriers of entry to that knowledge are lower than ever. So you can go on YouTube and you can learn about strategy. You can learn about marketing. You can learn about these different topics that ordinarily would not have been available to you. I would say 5 to 10 years ago. So through that process, I definitely learned a lot. And then through that discipline, you get accustomed to just having to go out and continuing this process of learning. So you can then move forward into learning how to manage your friends and to move forward and scale your business.
How'd you approach financing?
That's a great question. And that was actually the third challenge is managing these finances along with expectations of your team and those outside of your team. So moving forward, honestly, I found some folks in my network that had gone through this experience before, and folks that were in the tech industry that I could leverage my network to at least get introductions to, and they were receptive of these types of questions. And that's how I move forward and continue to move forward, to be honest.
Now I'm going to put a bookmark right there because my next piece I want to ask you is how you overcame a lot of those things and some of those challenges and as you look through, because obviously I'm sure they didn't just fall in your lap, you had to work through it.
Yeah.
So realistic timeline, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But I want to kind of go to Tracy for a minute. And if you can just talk to us about some of the resources that you know of that young entrepreneurs, I'm fortunate enough to be able to be a programmer here at the radio station and be the gatekeeper to playing a lot of the music, to play the music that we hear on the radio. And there's this new theory of everybody wanting to be a CEO or a big time executive because we see it celebrated on television. And I'm not saying everybody has to go to school to get that knowledge. Obviously that's not as cool. And Wayne will probably be a proponent of Googling education the same way Dan, your experience has been. And I'm okay with it too. But my goodness, this is the major leagues of radio. There's some type of preparation and research, some level of standard we ought to have as an industry. But again, I can get on a soapbox on that end, but talk to us a bit about what you see as some of the pieces that seem to work, not work, myths, about resources that people can use to be successful as, technology entrepreneurs.
That's a loaded question.
It really is. It really is.
Some resources, let's talk about resources and access. Some of the basic resources, I'm going to start from a student perspective, even thinking about entrepreneurship. The way education is set up is very traditional. Students are given this opportunity to read, write, do arithmetic, and learn and practice and study for the test.
Right.
Without any experience or opportunities to create, to collaborate, to use their creativity to inform their own learning. So that's a real basic resource and access to doing that. For example, I was working with a young woman who has an engineering organization. It's a science, engineering, math link. And she did an engineering design project with some 7th graders in West Oakland. And they had to draw an idea for a robot for sustainable life form or for a rocket. And so they had to draw a design. Then they had to figure out their prototype and then actually create it as a team. It's the first time these students had ever had an opportunity to work in a collaborative team on anything, ever. And so, and that was very telling because when they couldn't figure out how to design this robot because it didn't fit the formula that they came up with on paper, they were incredibly frustrated. They'd not experienced failure before. And so when they started working on it and they were frustrated and couldn't figure out, you know what, this is not looking like what we designed. It's not what we ideated. It's not what we created. And I said to them, 80% of engineers fail the first time. It was the first time they heard that. Really? You can actually fail and change something? And it's yes. And so when they changed they were able to change their prototype to something that was workable. And that was very telling for me that if we have our students at a very young age figuring out that failure is okay.
Wow.
How are they going to do what Dan said? You start something, you try something, it doesn't work. And you say, okay, you recuperate, you try something else. And you inform your own learning. We're not teaching our kids to be critical thinkers. we're expecting them to regurgitate information. And so there's got to be a movement, and there is a movement with 21st century learning skills, with the move in technology, to have students inform their learning so they can begin to think about being entrepreneurs. So if we can start on a very basic level,
Sure.
having students do hands-on work, I think it'd be beneficial.
I love it. I love it. Next, I want to get Wayne your perspective on what you've experienced from a mentorship perspective, and how some of the things that you observe and some of those successful pieces, how to achieve success, and then just overall the future of blacks in technology. Hold that thought.